And two, here's a quick follow-up because just a few days ago when I was last filming, I did a quick video on the forms, specifically the forms of the present subjunctive, and I said I would come back right quick with the forms of the perfect subjunctive because that is the only subjunctive tense that hasn't been addressed yet. Now again, this video is on forms, all right? I'm not going to be getting into examples of how to use. I will do that soon. But as we all know, the subjunctive is for various things, different kinds of subordinate clauses and some other stuff that you guys don't know about yet. So I'll address how to use them as I go through all of those various little videos, right? But just so you know what they look like and you know how to make them, this is what you do, all right? So this is what the perfect subjunctive looks like. It's actually pretty simple. It's the perfect stem plus ERI, and of course plus endings. You're going to have naturally personal endings, same way as we do on all finite verbs. And yeah, it's for showing previous action, okay? So first of all, to the actual forms, when I say it's the perfect stem plus ERI, of course we get our perfect stem from the third principal part. It's this bit here. It's everything but the I, right? Because when you look at the third principal part, what this actually is, this is the perfect first person singular indicative version of the verb. So this means I have played, since I'm using the verb to play as my example today. So this would mean I have played, but I don't want I have played, at least not in the indicative. I want I have played in the subjunctive. So I take the stem, which is everything except that I. I'm going to replace that with ERI plus my personal endings, which will give me this. Lucerem, luceris, lucerit, lucerimus, luceritis, lucerint. Right, a couple little things to note when I'm putting all this together. I am going to still have M in my first person, all right? It's not just going to end in I like the indicative did. And it's certainly not going to end in anything else. In fact, all of your subjunctive first persons end in M. They all have so far. So there's that. Also, you are going to have INT down here. I know you don't usually have INT. Usually it's a UNT. But this is not the first time we've seen INT. Which does bring me to my next thing. This does unfortunately look almost identical to the future perfect indicative. In fact, it actually does look identical to the future perfect indicative, except for the M. Right? The future perfect would have had lucero, but the rest of it actually looks identical to the future perfect. So how are you going to know the difference between a future perfect indicative and a perfect subjunctive? Oh, wait, you're not here to answer that question. The answer is context. Context is how you're going to know. And I know that people worry about that sometimes. They're like, oh my God, I have to figure it out on my own. Oh my God. But it really is not a big deal, right? I mean, if you remember what kinds of clauses use subjunctives, then it's going to be one of those, right? Like if you're not dealing with a cum clause or an indirect question or something, then it's probably not a perfect subjunctive, right? Or, you know, if whatever is going on in your story clearly happens in the future, well, then a future perfect is pretty likely. So, you know, the context really is not that hard to figure out. So anytime you need to use a perfect subjunctive, you're just going to use one of these forms. Wait a minute. Oh, if it's active. Ugh. That's the thing about perfects is you have to learn two forms of them because the active and the passive are built off of different stems. But that's fine because what we know about the perfect passive indicative tells us basically what we need to know about the perfect passive subjunctive. We just know to use the supine stem instead of the perfect one. And then you add your forms of the verb to be. So if you want this to be subjunctive, all you have to do is make sure that sum is subjunctive, which of course we've talked about in a previous video, but if you didn't watch that video or if you don't remember, well, there's your present subjunctive forms of sum. It's the sis, sis, sim, sis, sit. There we go, we start with sim. Simus, sitis, and sint. So these two tables together are the full perfect subjunctive, active and passive over there. All right? In the passive one, don't forget that when you go to the plural side, don't just make your form of soon plural. Also make sure that you make your supine plural as well, right? Where you had a US, you're going to have an I. Unless it was the subject was feminine, then it would be A to AE or UM to A for the neuter. And the only other thing I want to remind everybody here is that this is for previous action. I have that on the board on the other side. I said that it's for showing previous action or something that happened beforehand. That's referencing back to the video that I recently did on the sequence of tenses. So you're really only very likely to see these ever if you are in a subordinate clause in the primary sequence. And actually, for that reason, this is the least common of the subjunctive tenses that I ever see. Because a lot of the subjunctives I see are in the secondary sequence, where you use the imperfect or pluperfect subjunctive, right? And then you have your primary sequence ones, but actually, for reasons that have not been explained yet, you're way more likely to use present and imperfect subjunctives. Certain subordinate clauses really aren't going to use perfect or pluperfect. And so given that a lot of sentences are going to be in the secondary sequence and some kinds of subordinate clauses can't have previous action, you're actually not going to see this super often. You'll see it sometimes, so we have to know it, but you're not going to see it much. So that is what it looks like, and I'm going to come back real soon, in a few days, sometime next week, and start giving you examples of what kinds of clauses you can use these in. All right, so stay tuned, Latin 2. We are almost to the end of the year and almost to the end of our topics. We're so close, but we've got like 3 big ones left. So I will see you ever so soon.